Hello, everyone. We are Southeastern Pennsylvania branch of the Anthroposophical Society in America's webinar. And what we're going to do is have the president of the branch, Sherry Wildfoyer, introduce not just the webinar, but also our guest, Dennis Klochek. Great.
Okay.
Thank you, Sherry.
So welcome to the fifth talk in our series, Shining a Light into the Darkness, sponsored by the Southeast Pennsylvania branch of the Anthroposophical Society. This series was inspired on Epiphany 1 year ago, just 3 days after the death of David Gershon, a dedicated anthroposophic physician who practiced in San Francisco. And it was encouraged by Philip Nkeo, also a wise and gifted anthroposophic physician who lived in Colorado and died last February. So we are dedicating the whole series of talks to these two doctors who were concerned not only with the practice of medicine, but with helping to awaken people's awareness of the forces that are working into their thinking in current culture. And now I have the pleasure of introducing today's speaker, Dennis Klochek. If I had only one sentence to describe Dennis, I would say he is the opposite of a couch potato. Got you there. He's active as a teacher of Goethean science, consciousness studies. He's an artist. He's active in agriculture, alchemy, the study of weather, and lots more. And what ties all of his diverse interests and activities together is his championing of the potential of the human soul. What makes him such a treasure and resource at this particular time is that it is precisely the human soul that is under severe attack from multiple directions. Dennis will speak to us today about how to cultivate health and liveliness in our souls, especially as we are confronted by attempts to dull us down. So we will passively accept ideas that come to us from outside. Dennis, we look forward to what you will share with us.
Thank you, Sherry. God bless you. Thank you. Yeah, this is a big deal here today about the soul. So I'd like to start out by asking the question, what is medicine? And to my understanding, I'd like to bring two ideas together here up here, the idea of Goethean morphology and anthroposophy. So Goethean morphology could be called the book of nature, and anthroposophy could be called the book of the human. And in today's world, the book of nature and the book of the human have been separated from each other. And in the past, they were part of what was known as mystery wisdom. Rudolf Steiner many, many times talked about the need to bring those two together. And when they come together, they create, in my thinking, something that we could call medicine, but medicine in the sense of the Native Americans, meaning the world is a picture of my soul, and my soul is a picture of the world. And today, in medicine, established medicine, we really focus on acute intervention and pharmacology. And in the book of the human, Apparently today it's mostly politics, which is highly dysfunctional. But the mystery teachers in the past have given us something that Rudolf Steiner has called living picture imagination. And Goethe, as a poet, championed living picture imagination in his whole life, in his whole work. He called it higher beholding. Rudolf Steiner called it etheric vision. And really what it means is that the pictures of the phenomena of the world are creative imaginations of spiritual beings. And they come to humans as a healing force. But we need to have organs in our soul of perception of them so that they can be absorbed, I could say, by our blood. Our I being lives in our blood in the warmth of the blood, according to Rudolf Steiner. And the warmth in the blood is fundamentally an enthusiasm for living. And when we lose the enthusiasm for living, we lose the ability to see that everything in the world was made to help humans to heal. The native peoples understood that because they lived close to nature, and the great religion of the North America was called give away. Give away means that everything gives something to something else and receives something from something else. And when giveaway is balanced, then that's health. And when giveaway is not balanced, that is illness. So I'd like to give you a picture of the idea of higher beholding or etheric vision with a living picture that is present in the forming of the embryo in the second and third week. There's a kind of book of the blending of the book of nature and the book of human at that point, because the hierarchies that create that organ systems of the embryo have a kind of free reign because the soul is not yet rejecting them. They are received, the imaginations are received from the hierarchies in a pure way. But there is a drama of the organs in the third week. And I'd like to give you a picture of what that drama is, because it's based on the idea of trust. An organ like the heart receives the blood of the whole body, but then it gives the blood to the whole body in a kind of tasting and hearing and seeing process. In the third week of the development of the embryo, the heart begins its drama of incarnating in search of a home. And it starts its drama outside as a hollow, like a bubble. It's a picture of the forces of the periphery of the cosmos that are coming from all directions towards a center. That center will eventually be what we call, or what Rudolf Steiner has called, the human eye. It's gathering the forces of the cosmos from the periphery, but it's in search of something. It's in search of a home that it doesn't have, because the home that it's searching for is the blood. The blood that it's searching for does not come from the cosmos, but it comes from the mother, from nature. So we could say the I being, or the I, the human I, is bereft and in search of having a drama of looking to go home. And when it goes home, it finds itself in the beginning above and outside the head of the future human in the cosmos. And it starts its drama by going through an opening in the embryo, right there. That is a meeting point between the developing neurology and the developing metabolic and circulatory systems of the blood. It passes through that opening, and the name in that opening is translates as the mouth of God, the stomodeum, the hole of God, or God's hole, if you will, that the human eye passes through in order to enter into the future body. And when it passes through, the opening closes, and the developing neurology and the developing circulatory system come in contact with each other for the first time. And they merge and they close the hole. And now the human heart is inside the body, and the hole that has been closed behind it has another name. It's called the pituitary gland, the master gland of the body that will regulate life for the rest of the human life. But the heart is still searching. It's empty. That hole then becomes something called the pericardium. The pericardium is fate mapped. Fate mapping has been an amazing study by embryologists that the embryo I'm describing to you is about the size of a grain of rice. But it's been studied in detail. And they can take that little opening of the pericardium and they can track the most minute development of organs from the very beginning up to their fate as a liver, a lung, or a kidney, or a heart. The heart is fate mapped to descend through the embryo in search of the blood. The blood is fate mapped to come from the yolk sac. The yolk, provided by the mother, turns into blood. It has to come from the outside and enter through the umbilical cord into the future liver. In the future liver, the blood swells that liver and gives it nutrition, and the liver begins its drama to lift the blood up towards the heart. It's fate mapped to do that because that's what it does at term. So the blood has the destiny to rise to meet the heart that's descending from the cosmos. And when that happens, that develops the potential for the human heart to descend from the cosmos to serve the human being through the whole life. And that's a big ticket item. That's a big, difficult thing. And you know, when the heart finally gets to that position and has to listen to the venous circulation and regulate the arterial circulation for the whole life, there is a feeling that arises in that organ when it's not in balance. When it's in balance, it's called tempering. When it's out of balance, it's called intemperate. The need to balance the organs to give and receive is the basis of what we call temperament. Each organ that is tempering is receiving and giving. And when it's out of balance, the physician needs to bring it back into harmony to be able to receive and to give without stress. But we all know that sometimes illness happens. And when illness happens, that means that the imaginations that are coming to the organ are not received by the organ. And Rudolf Steiner has mentioned what he calls the occult law of organ formation. And that is that the imaginations that form the organ become the function of the organ when it's completed. And when the organ is completed, because of the generosity of the hierarchies to keep giving us imaginations to our organs so that they can function, there's a superfluity of those imaginations that rises off of the surface of the organs. And we call that consciousness. And the consciousness of the heart or the liver or the lung is the basis of the consciousness of having a temperament. And when everything is in balance, the temperaments are in balance, and the soul that is receiving all the different organ tempering imaginations is in balance. When it's not, it needs help, and that requires an understanding of why it's not in balance. The drama of the heart descending in through the embryo causes a kind of wrinkle in the hierarchical imaginations. And the wrinkle causes difficulties that arise in the drama of the descent of the heart into its place. And the heart descending into its place gets fixed and realizes, I'm not competent to do all this all the time. And that's a feeling of resignation in the heart to having a destiny of having to come from a free spiritual world into a body. And we could say that imagination is a Christ imagination who became flesh and dwelled among us. So the heart is carrying that, and it has a kind of resignation to do that. It's willing to do that. But in the process of descending, it has a kind of karma to push the other organs around. This becomes then the choleric temperament. I'm the boss. I'll tell you what to do and go do it. That's cholera. So the first organ that gets pushed around is something called the pronephros. Up there, up around where the ears form. And there are two little nodes, and they get pushed all the way down to the very bottom of the embryo, down to where the sacrum will form. And then they turn around and come back slowly. And they become then the kidneys. We could call them Adam and Eve, who were pushed out of the garden to return late and slow. And when they were pushed out of the garden, their eyes were opened and they saw they were naked and they felt ashamed. So the kidneys have a drama, but they're pushed out of paradise and they live in a region then where they experience shame. They're connected to excretion, reproduction, and kind of what we could call shameful things. And that's their drama. And when they are not balanced, the soul experiences a kind of existential shame. I'm shamed because I've been pushed out of paradise because of some mistakes I made somewhere, and I'm paying for it. So that is the beginning of the drama, but it doesn't end there, because as the kidneys descend, they go all the way to the bottom, and they start to push up on the liver, and the liver's caught down here receiving the blood all the time. And eventually the liver says, you know, this blood keeps coming in and I keep lifting it, but I know that I'm not lifting it to the point where I actually am controlling it. All I can do is lift it up a little bit. And I wish I could do better. I wish I could kind of be a heart, but it's not a heart, it's a liver. I often say it's a short order cook that's trapped down there in the bottom. Has to cook the blood and send it on like a short order cook, but never gets out in a restaurant to see the people enjoy it. Gets stuck down there. So the liver has a stress too. It's receiving life, but then it has to lift the life and move it on a little bit. So it becomes stressed by life. That's why we call it a liver. And when the liver gets stressed by the descent of the kidneys being pushed down by the heart, there is a little wave that comes off in embryo in the 3rd week off of the liver that kind of tries to make another little liver, but it doesn't quite get there. It gets pushed up instead of down. And when it gets pushed up, it comes near where the stomodeum is, and it gets penetrated by the bronchioles. In other words, it gets pushed out on stage and has to deal with the world. And then we call it a lung. So the lung is afraid and has stress from what comes to it from the outside. And the liver has stress and gets stressed by what comes to it from the inside. And the kidneys get stressed by the fact that they're down in the basement and they should be up there kind of having sensations of what's coming in from all outside in the world, but they've been pushed down into the metabolic realm to take care of reproduction and excretion. So we could say these 4 organs, the liver, lung, kidney, and heart, have a kind of drama of a gift that they receive and a gift they have to give. And when that's in balance, the temperaments are in balance. But the evolution of the human through the different phases of life creates an imbalance because each organ will produce its drama to the soul consciousness as part of the maturation of the human. And that creates a difficulty. So the liver in its life stress says, I should do more. And because I can't do more, I'm guilty. The kidneys get pushed out of paradise and say, I'm ashamed. The heart descends from the cosmos and says, you know, I'm really not competent to do all this. And the lung gets pushed up out of the metabolism on the stage and says, I fear the world. I fear cat dander. I fear smoke. I fear allergens. I fear pollen. And I also fear what comes to me in the form of lies. I become afraid to live. And that's then called phobia. There's specific things in the world that the lung is afraid of. And primarily, it's things that are not true. And when things come to it continually that are not true, it creates a kind of anxiety. And that anxiety then produces hormones, and the hormones go in the blood to the heart, and the heart receives those imbalanced hormones based on lies that are coming into the lung. And then the heart tries to balance that with its own secretions and hormones, and they go into the blood, and then the kidneys get that, and they have to decide what is good and what is not good, and then the liver receives all that from the whole peripheral circulation and has to say, well, I have to balance all this. So it's my experience, and it's my understanding at this point in my life. I'm getting to be an old guy. I've been through a lot, so I'm starting to understand that the great challenge for human health today is lying in public. It presents a constitutional challenge to the integrity of the temperamental balance of the organism, based on the drama of this, the difficulties of the drama of the organs in the second and third week. And here we get then to the theme of placebo and propaganda. I'm going to read a few things to you from some research I've done. If you like a little more information about this, there's a man who, Ted, and his last name is Kaptchuk, Ted Kaptchuk, and Google Ted Kaptchuk placebo. And what Ted Kaptchuk did was he did a clinical drug trials with 262 adults with IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, and he formed 3 groups. And a no treatment control group that were told they're on a waiting list for treatment. A second group received sham acupuncture with needles. The acupuncture needles actually retracted and never penetrated the skin. And the third group received sham acupuncture with a great deal of attention lavished on them by the practitioner. And the attention was that at least 20 minutes were given by the practitioner who gave the acupuncture to reinforce the idea that this treatment has excellent results. Practitioners were also required to touch the hands or shoulder of the members of the third group and spend at least 20 seconds with them, lost in thoughtful silence. That's really a biggie today, when most of the practitioners you run into in the HMO are with their back to you looking in the computer. God bless them. They're there, but they're being hamstrung in their work. The results were not surprising, that the patients who experienced the greatest relief were those who received the most care. The placebo treatments all required deception on the part of the doctors, which was an aspect of placebo medicine that raises serious ethical questions. This was disturbing for Kaptchuk too, because what if he simply told people that they were taking placebos? His team again compared 2 groups of IBS sufferers. One group received no treatment. The other patients were told they'd be taking fake inert drugs delivered in bottles called placebo pills, and also told that the placebos often have healing effects. The study's results shocked the investigators themselves. Even patients who knew they were taking placebos described real improvement, reporting twice as much symptom relief as the control group. Twice as much. That's a difference so significant, says Kapchuk. It's comparable to the improvement seen in trials for the best real IBS drugs. Kapchuk says, we'd hoped for measurable objective changes. What we got instead was a more precise diagram of placebo and how clearly the ritual of medicine makes more people comfortable. No one has yet studied how long-term experience of the ritual of medicine might ultimately affect the course of chronic afflictions. We hope we've opened up that path. So if you go to an HMO and you need a surgery for a gallbladder or an appendix, get really good care technically. But that afternoon, you're told to go home and take ibuprofen. And you end up with something called post-operative cognitive delirium in the acute phase, or post-operative cognitive disorder in the chronic phase, otherwise known as brain fog. Statistics show that 70% of people over 65 years of age will have COPD for an extended period of time after any surgical intervention. This is known to researchers as the silver tsunami. There's a tsunami of brain fog among the elderly, having to do with surgical interventions. And if you ever go through the process, you can get excellent acute care, but your chronic care is basically you're on your own. So there are 4 rules, according to insurance companies, for effective placebo. It's considered that 20 to 25% of the effectiveness of any drug is placebo. That's what the research is showing. So these are the 4 rules that insurance companies use when they want to send an inspector in to determine whether the treatment will get awards or not. Number 1, the patient must trust the remedy. 2, the patient must trust in the protocol for delivering the remedy. 3, the patient must trust that the practitioner has made a correct diagnosis. And 4, the patient must feel that the practitioner has given adequate information about the procedure and the remedy and the outcome. Those 4, if they are present in the analysis of the problem, and then the diagnosis, and then the prescription, the remedy has a 25% better chance of working, according to statistics. And all 4 of them talk about trust. It's the trust in the ritual of the medicine that provides a 25% potential for the medicine having the effect that the practitioner and the patient both hope it has. The book of nature and the book of the human produce the medicine. Now, That's trust. Your liver has to trust that it's going to receive what it can lift to give to the heart. The lung has to receive what it gets from the right side of the heart and trust that it can give that to the left side of the heart. Each organ has to trust in order to be tempered. The soul has to trust in order to be tempered. The soul has to trust in order to be healed. And today, with the way the media are operating on the souls of humans, the trust is the very thing that's being attacked by lying. And the more public figures lie in public, and no one can censure that, the more there'll be mass psychosis, according to Rudolf Steiner, who was talking about the rise of the Third Reich. He said, when public officials lie in public, that opens the door to mass psychosis. And friends, here we are. So I'm going to read something to you now about propaganda, because propaganda is organized lying. Now, Rudolf Steiner has made a statement: any attempt to put my point of view on someone else is a fundamental violation of the human eye. And it causes resentment and mistrust. And that is highly rampant today because it's highly organized. So back in the day, there was a man named Giordano Bruno, and he wrote something called A General Account of Bonding. And he was interested in the way in which dictators, where they get their power. So here's what he wrote, or an example of what he wrote. Bruno examines psychological manipulation. In psychological manipulation, it is less the sexual love of a consort of Eros, but rather an erotic love of the masses, which serves the manipulator as a chain of power. It's a misplaced love. Bruno recognized that manipulated love was a powerful instrument of control for the seduction of the masses. His theory contributes much to an understanding of the ecstatic attractiveness that dictators exercise over the people who love them. Bruno's observations on erotic love as a chain towards political power concern the manipulation of the erotic force in order to produce worldly power. It's a misplaced love. Bruno recognized that love in the broadest sense is the true elixir of life. It's health, which first makes possible the establishment and maintenance of institutions of power headed by people such as Pope, the Dalai Lama, or a dictator, a beloved dictator. Don't you love me? This attains magical power through the manipulation of images and signs of synchronous events and symbols that are manipulated. I'm going to read you a little quote from Joseph Goebbels, Hitler's Minister of Propaganda. And this was put out at a time when the Wehrmacht, the war machine of Hitler, was being defeated in Russia. had a real bad time there, got bogged down because of general incompetence of the generals. Does this sound familiar? It's kind of going on now, right? And this is Goebbels talking about the change that the propaganda was trying to inculcate in the German people in order to cover up the fact that the whole thing was going downhill. This was in the newspaper. And by the way, there were hundreds of poems written by people daily about how we need this war, First World War. And Rudolf Steiner, I'm sure, got gray hair about reading them. This is Joseph Goebbels on the stupidity of democracy. We see the National Socialist Revolution, which is the Third Reich, as an event that affects the entire world for the future. It is a warning for the entire liberal world that Germany has replaced democracy with an authoritarian system, that parliamentarianism and the party system are outdated and unacceptable concepts for us. A new kind of authority has been established in every area of public life in Germany. The insane belief of the masses in equality is no more. The principle of personality has replaced the stupid notion of popular idiocy known as voting. Hello out there. So, recently, I've had the experience to deal with a beloved person to me who is experienced extreme reaction to a late in life appendectomy and has developed POCD in a highly developed way. And over the years of my work, what I've tried to help adults do is find remedies that they themselves can take in order to bring the soul and the body into a little more intimate contact. And it's been my experience that homeopathic remedies work much better if they're accompanied by Bach flower remedies. And the way I think about it is that the Bach flower remedies provide a kind of bridge between the life body and the astral body, and the homeopathic remedies provide a bridge between the I and the astral body. And there's a kind of a linking that can happen. So I've worked with them over the years to create a kind of mandala, that's what you see here, of the Bach flower remedies. And the reason I got attracted to them is statements by Rudolf Steiner that if a human were a single plant, they would be very ill. That the different organs in the body are basically kind of flowers. They're a flowering of the embryo, and that the flower on a plant is the equivalent, is the equivalent of the drama of the plant, that is the drama of a liver or a lung or a kidney. And that the flower remedies of Dr. Bach are perfect examples of Goetheanism through higher beholding of the relationship between the human soul and the soul of the world that hovers around a plant that is struggling to overcome something in its environment. And the image that it produces of its triumph over that is a flower. And the flower is the astral image of the hierarchical beings that have helped the plant overcome its dysfunction. So what I want to do now is look at 4 polycrests of the Bach flower remedies in the context of the liver, lung, kidney, and heart. And what Dr. Bach found in the flower remedies are amazing parallels to the drama that the organs go through in the 2nd week and 3rd week of incarnation. Yeah, it's an amazing world that way. Yeah. So the Bach flowers have what Dr. Bach called polycrests. They are the equivalent of the homeopathic constitutions. A homeopathic constitution is a particular substance like, arsenicum album, natrum muriaticum, aurum. And when these substances get potentized, they touch things in the body in many different ways. That's a constitutional remedy rather than a remedy like staphysagria that is a remedy for surgical intervention. But once you heal up from your surgical intervention, you don't need staphysagria anymore, but usually revert to your one of the 12 constitutional remedies: salt, sulfur, mercury, whatever. So there are 4 of them that I have found in the Bach flower remedies that are highly effective if they're used with each other. If you then place in the center a constitutional remedy, they're like a way of proving the Constitution, because they relieve from the soul a kind of belief structure. And I'd like to explain that belief structure using a kind of living picture imagination in a Goethean context of what a larch is or what a wild rose is from Goethean observation, having to do with the way in which the plant is struggling in its environment to overcome an imbalance. And when it does that, it's able to produce a flower. And the production of a flower is the difference between the lower plants, the middle plants, conifers and things like that, and the higher plants. We could say all plants are dreaming of doing better. And when they have a dream of doing better, the picture of that, we call that a flower. So typically, a person that has POCD, post-operative cognitive disorder, of what we could call brain fog, has an experience that somehow they did something wrong. They could have done better somewhere along the line. And so they have a, quote, karma to be ill. And if you talk to physicians, they will tell you the most difficult part of healing is getting the patient to think they can be healed. And according to anthroposophy, that is Christ's method of operation all the time in doing a healing. He didn't walk in the room and said, "You're healed." He came to them and said, do you believe you can be healed? And if they said yes, he said, my Father in heaven heals you. Take up your bed and walk. And sin no more. Doesn't mean you're bad. I always think sin is like Spanish, sin, without. And what are you without? You're without the love of God. So you feel bereft, you feel lonely, you feel like you can never be healed. You feel like you're guilty, feel like you could have done more somewhere along the line, but you quite didn't. And there's a plant that has that feeling, we could say, when it tries to produce a flower, and that's a pine. We have the phrase pining away. And when a person is pining away, usually there is a kind of a failed love affair. If only I had been better, if only I had done better. Now, why is the pine pining? Because it has abandoned all the lower plant forms, the mosses and ecosystems and fungi and algae, in order to try and make a flower. But it can only make a little wooden flower. So it kind of has a feeling, I could have done this better. And I left everybody behind, and then I end up with this. The pine has a drama like the liver. Gee, I could have probably done better with this, but it's the best I could do. And in the soul, that's called existential guilt. I exist, therefore I am guilty. Mea culpa, mea maxima culpa. And that's a root in the soul that a practitioner has to kind of deal with. No, you're not guilty with your illness. You are blessed by your illness, but you just don't know it. So how can we uncover it? How can we lift it up? How can we find out what is going on with you? So the liver sends its energy to the heart. So the pine then has a member of its family, the larch. And the larch, so the liver is the alpha of the blood, and the kidney is the omega of the blood. So the kidney flower is the larch flower. It's a conifer. It has a cone, and it's in the family of the pines, but it's the only deciduous evergreen that sheds all of its needles every year. And there's an old legend about the larch that Mary and Joseph were fleeing Herod with the Christ child, and they wanted to shelter under a larch tree. But among the conifers, the larch tree is the only one that gets really beautiful yellow and red in the fall. Everything else is an evergreen. And the legend goes that when the Holy Family came under the Lord said, why don't you just go under a pine? Because I'm so beautiful that, I really, And then a little bird told the larch, that was the savior of the world there that you blew off. And the larch was so ashamed that all its needles fell off, and it saw it was naked, and it was ashamed just by Adam and Eve, who are the kidneys. So the drama of the larch is similar to the drama of the kidneys. They did something in paradise that was like a little, I can do this. And then they were cast out and they were shamed. Why? Because they saw they were naked. Isn't that a beautiful picture? Yeah. Yeah. So a person that's locked in with POCD, brain fog, after some type of a surgical intervention, especially we're talking about geriatric patients, and it's epidemic with geriatric patients. They go in, they have a stent put in, veins are taken out of their leg to do a bypass, and they're sent home, and then they have cognitive disorder that leads to dementia. And we wonder why. It's because their soul has not been helped, just their body. So very often in post-operative cognitive disorder, there is a manifestation of a deep fear that is connected to a stubbornness that is monumental. I will never be healed. I cannot be healed. I am not worthy to be healed. And if you tell me I can be healed, I'm going to be so stubborn and give you such blowback as a physician that you are going to want to tell me to go see somebody else. You physicians out there, you may have noticed that. And there's a flower remedy for that. It's called centauri. And the word centauri comes from the word centaur, which was, in the Greek language, the guy with the back end of a horse. And the reason why the centaur had the back end of a horse, because the centaur was a healer who understood the human and the natural world, the animal nature of the human. So centauri was named after that being because it was understood by Dr. Bach that the centauri was a kind of central go-to that was necessary for people to get healed, because they feared, we could say, they feared disappointing the physician, because they didn't want to disappoint the physician by having an illness, because the physician would reject them by having an illness. But the physician is there to help them, but they feel like they've disappointed the physician and they can't accept that disappointment because it makes them feel terrible. And then when they feel terrible, they say, I'm not worthy to be in the presence of this physician. The remedy for that is centauri, because that's a lung issue, which is, I fear the world. I fear getting helped. I fear people doing things for me, because then if I have to have people do things for me, I have to realize that I need help. And if I realize that I need help, I'm, yada, 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 down the rat hole. Now, why do we use centauri? Centauri is a member of the gentian family. And the gentian is a very bitter family of plants. But most herbalists use the root of the gentians. But the centauri uses the flowers. And I'm sure, I would imagine Dr. Bach recognized in a Goethean way the phenomenology of the flowers, because it's very unique for the centauri. The centauri flower opens early in the morning as the sun is rising, and then by mid-morning closes up and goes away. This is the patient coming in with hopes into the doctor's office and meeting the doctor and going, oh man, I don't know. I don't know. I'm disappointing this person by being sick, and it makes me feel bad. So I'm not worthy of this. So I'm going to close up against whatever they're bringing because they're probably secretly thinking I'm really bad and kind of, I maybe deserve this. That's a lung feeling. And the flower of Centauri helps ease that because it's overcome that in its own physiology. There's a picture of that, a living picture in the etheric world. It's a living etheric vision of a soul pathology of the lung. And then the final one is used by Dr. Bach and practitioners to release blocks, because what I've been talking about is blocks to healing. And that's the wild rose that affects the heart. Now, the wild rose is very, very interesting because the rubrics in the Bach flower remedies around the wild rose is, I'm not competent and all is hopeless. This is for people who say, I've tried so many things, I've tried so many modalities, I've visited so many people that I am basically a hopeless basket case. So, can you heal me? Let me, I'll get back to you on this is hopelessness. And you know, when people get over the age of 65, they kind of move out of the world where they have a lot of hope that things are going to be different. And they move into the realm of Heartbreak Hotel, like Elvis Presley talked about, down on the lonely street in Heartbreak Hotel. All is hopeless. Nothing can help me. I'm done. And just let me sit in my rocker and stare out the window. So postoperative cognitive disorder is characterized by that modality. It's a block that prevents the person from receiving treatment. And the reason why the wild rose is there is because the wild rose is kind of a bridge between like the bramble fruits and the pears and apples and raspberries and the actual roses, the true flower. It's kind of caught like the pines and larches in the middle by having seeds that are extremely dormant. And instead of having bees and things come and propagate it, it is self-fertile. It's decided, it's just me here. I'm the only one. Here's my seed. I'm going to make my own seeds. And as a result of that, that self-fertile seed is doubly dormant, meaning you got to wake up that seed 2 or 3 times over in order to get it to germinate. In the soul, that's called a block. You have to bang on it and bang on it and bang on it and bang on it in order to get it to receive, to open up, to become living, to join the world. And when the wild rose finally does that, it lives down in a thicket somewhere and it receives just what it needs to come out of dormancy. It grows up with huge thorns on it and climbs on other things because it can't support itself, which is what it's afraid of. That it can't support itself, and then it goes and da da da. So I've used these as a kind of mandala or a lens to place to give a person to help them or to have them help themselves. And in that, place one of the 12 homeopathic constitutional remedies and see what the response is. And it takes away from the homeopathic remedy the burden of having to also drag the soul up into the process. It kind of frees the soul to receive the homeopathic. So especially a constitution. And you could put a different constitution in and watch how the soul responds, because the flower essences are giving it a kind of boundary against its own dysfunction, its own inability to clear the brain fog. So I wanted to share these kind of Goethean organ plant things with you, because I think the physicians can really gain a lot by studying temperament that has been kind of lost to them by simply using the body make 'em. You know, here's the symptom, here's the remedy, get it from Valeda, inject it, see me Tuesday. There's something in the soul of the ritual between the physician and the patient that can be opened up by the imaginative cognition of the physician about how the world soul and the human soul interact. Because the world soul is being attacked, like Sherry said, daily with lying. I'd like to finish here with an excerpt from Lecture 8, The Apocalypse of St. John by Rudolf Steiner. After the great war of all against all, gradually the evil stream will be led over to good by the good race, by the good stream. This will be one of the principal tasks after the great war of all against all, to rescue what can be rescued from those who, after the great war, still only have the impulse to fight one another and allow the ego to express itself in the most extreme egoism. Such things are always provided for in advance in the spiritual guidance of humanity. Do not consider it unduly severe in the plan of creation. Consider it rather as something that is wise in the highest degree in the plan of creation. Consider that through the evil separating from the good will receive its greatest strengthening. For after the great war of all against all, the good will have to make every possible effort to rescue the evil during the period in which this still will be possible. This will not merely be a work of education such as it exists today. My thesis is this is the work of etheric vision of the etheric Christ. But occult forces will cooperate, for in this next great epoch, men will understand how to set occult forces in motion. The good people will have the task of working upon their brothers in the evil movement. In this way, much will be accomplished. To me, this is etheric vision. And I bring it to you. I've spent my life trying to understand this. And now I'm in a position in my own family to have to deal with this in a pretty powerful way. And I want to bring it to you with heartfelt feelings about the older people who we need to serve, who are being just cast away by certain aspects of the medical industrial complex that don't believe that humans have souls. And I know the anthroposophical physicians are not in that realm, but my plea is that you talk amongst yourselves about how can we study temperament, because that is the Goetheanistic living picture imagination that can help us help others.
Well, thank you so very much. I just have the thought of the fruits of anthroposophical striving. I think that's what you shared with us today. And I just have this idea of someday a culture where the free cultural life is so alive that it allows and supports individuals in their strivings, spiritual scientific strivings, such that not just Dennis Klochek, but many people will be able to have these insights and share them, and to bring about a much more beautiful world than we currently live in today. One last thing from Melissa, which is throughout the series, there's come this question: what does Christian thinking mean? And just if you could you describe that from your perspective out of anthroposophy to someone who might think this phrase means something that's a little more mainstream Christian. If you could just talk a little bit about that to close our time. Thank you.
Yeah. Years ago, I had the privilege of studying the life of a Native American healer. His name was Wovoka, W-O-V-O-K-A. And he lived out here in Nevada and was a shaman and a healer. And he had the experience. He was a weather prophet and a healer and a shaman. And it was at the time in the late 1800s, early 1900s, when there was a Native American religion called the Ghost Shirt religion. And the Ghost Shirt religion started in New York State in the 1700s and moved west as the white man moved west, and eventually ended up out here in Walker Valley on the other side of the Sierras. And that's where Wovoka lived. And the Ghost Shirt religion was that warriors would give a shirt to a shaman. He would wear it, and then he would give the shirt back to the warrior, and that shirt made the warriors immune to the white man's bullets. This was a millennial belief among the warriors to try to deal with their cultural, the dissolving of their culture, basically. So Wovoka ended up doing that. And in the process of getting caught up in that, one day he was out chopping wood, and he heard a sound in the sky and fell down in a coma as if he was dead. And the people came up and they thought he was dead. He was hardly breathing. they carried him back, and they were actually thinking about doing the last rites for him. But he wasn't deteriorating, and they could feel a little bit of a heartbeat, so they left him there for 12 days. He awoke after 12 days on the first day after the end of Kali Yuga. And he, instead of dealing with the ghost shirt, he awakened with a perception of Jesus. And he began to preach reconciliation to the people about Jesus. And his gospel was, you need to understand that Jesus is in nature. The white man doesn't understand that Jesus is in nature, but you people, you can understand Jesus is in nature because you understand nature. You just have to understand Jesus. And unfortunately, at that time, many of the braves that were killed at Wounded Knee were wearing shirts from Wovoka. The federal government found that out and put a price on his head. And he had to go in hiding with his family. And my understanding was that his awakening as a Native person was an example of the supreme teaching of the Native peoples of this country, which was give away the place of the North, the place of death. He went through a ritual death that Rudolf Steiner would say is the very mark of a mystery teacher. And he awakened in the first day of the new age of light and began to preach reconciliation. But his gospel was, Jesus is in nature. And as a Goetheanist, I rejoiced at that the giveaway meant that Goethe and Rudolf Steiner, who at 21 was the editor of the scientific work of Goethe in the Goethe archives at Weimar, was bringing the study of nature as a Christian idea, having very little to do with church, because the church was the natural world. And Rudolf Steiner says, I find my I in the world finds its I in me. This is pure Goetheanism. This is pure teaching of the natural world, and the native peoples brought that. So a couple of years ago, I did a fast and I took a pilgrimage out to Wovoka's gravesite, out on the out on the reservation out there in Nevada. My wife and I went out, and the cemetery, the native cemetery, is really kind of blown away as beer cans and plastic bags blowing around. But right in the middle was a big granite tombstone with the Wovoka's name on it, donated by the federal government, because they realized posthumously that he was preaching the gospel of peace through understanding that Jesus is in nature. To me, that's the true Christian future. And today we call it climate study. We have to understand Christ is here, flowing between us, and is the agent of change in the climate. The native peoples had a name for Christ in nature. They called him Wahogas, the elder brother, the guardian of the elementals, the one who lives in the natural world to provide everything for humans. we're kind of missing that in our churches. And yet, Rudolf Steiner, through the work of Goethe, has said, you know, if you find Christ in the world, Christ will find himself in your soul. That's the breathing. So to me, the whole idea of Christ and the Christian is the flowing of love between people and the natural world and back again. It's I think we've been given all the tools by Rudolf Steiner to do that, and I'm hoping we can kind of share that with each other down the road, because if we don't begin to find Jesus in nature, we're going to really have more problems than we do now, for sure.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for that, for those thoughts and words to reflect on. So thank you very much for your presentation, Dennis. It was very moving. Thank you all so much for spending some time with us, and we'll see you next time. And thank you again, Dennis, not just for this presentation, but for your earnest striving throughout a beautifully lived life. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.